this is Anada from BoldVoice, and today we're sharing the top things I wish I knew about English before I moved to the US. So I have with me our coach, Eliza Simpson. She's a Hollywood accent coach and one of our coaches on the BoldVoice app. Eliza, do you want to share a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Eliza. I'm an accent and speech coach. I'm based in New York City, but I work with individuals all over the world who want more confidence and clarity in their speech. Yeah.
Awesome.
That's me.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us. And the reason we're talking about this topic today is actually sharing a little bit of my personal story because before I founded BoldVoice, I still am an immigrant in the US. And that's partially what inspired me to start the BoldVoice app, which is I was born and raised in Albania, learned English from a young age, but when I moved to the US for college, I realized how different what I had learned on paper was from what I saw when communicating with native speakers. Oftentimes I was misunderstood or asked to repeat myself, and I realized that was something that was happening to a lot of immigrants and non-native English speakers when they moved to the US. Again, perfect English on paper, but when it comes to speaking, because you've learned it from books or from teachers with their own accent, they're not as clear and as confident as you want to be. So hopefully today we'll share a little bit about my journey. We'll share some tips and tricks that hopefully will help you all, skip some of the mistakes that I made in my own journey and get to that end point faster.
So what I would love to know is walk me through your English journey. Mm-hmm. So when you started using it, what was the context? Then when you moved to a new space, how did you use it? What surprised you when you got there?
Yeah, happy to do that. And I hope that this can also help other people who are going through something similar learn those things that took me a long time to learn faster. But my personal journey is that I started learning English pretty early on, like when I was in school, in elementary school probably. And I think a lot of people who are non-native English speakers start learning it very early on in their countries. And I was studying it for basically 10 years before I moved to the US. So on paper, I felt super confident. I was like, I got this. I was getting great grades on all of my tests. Yes. So perfect. And it was good enough to get me into college in the US. So it wasn't even in the back of my mind as a concern at the time. And then I got here and I remember I was not understood at all. And people would ask me to repeat myself all the time. And that really shocked me because I'd never realized that I had an accent before. But then, of course, in hindsight, I'd only ever learned English from teachers who had an accent of their own or from books. So when it came to, grammar and writing, it was really solid. But when it came to speaking, I had an accent. So people would ask me to repeat myself. So it was definitely a difficult process to go through. First of all, the process of creating an awareness that, I actually sound a little different than other people around me. And then figuring out the path to get to a point where I'm today, where I still have an accent and people can hear it, but it doesn't prevent me from being understood and feeling confident, which is where we want to ultimately help people get with BoldVoice as well. It's not to erase any trace of your accent, because where's the fun in that? Exactly. But we just want to help people be understood and confident so they can, achieve their potential. They can feel confident in the workplace, in their personal lives.
Yeah. That's the biggest confidence crusher though, when somebody asks you to repeat something and you're like,
Because then the next time you want to speak, you're like, you kind of like don't feel confident in saying something. It's always then in the back of your head. Like, can I even speak up because will I be understood? So, and I hear this a lot from some of our users, is that they speak less in a conference call or in team meetings. They feel more confident expressing their thoughts on paper with emails, but that can really, unfortunately harm your career. So anyway, I faced a bunch of steps in the process and like a bunch of challenges and difficulties. The first thing, I there's so much when it comes to English, right? We could talk for days.
Hours and hours.
Yes. But I think we can highlight some of the things that are most challenging, and hopefully some things that will help others as well kickstart their process of gaining more confidence in their English. So the first thing that comes to mind is the sounds themselves, and how different spelling is from pronunciation in English.
It is like it's the I think most difficult part of the language is that separation between when you have confidence and competence with written English and when you have confidence and competence with spoken English. They're both important, they're both necessary, and they are different skill sets. So to allow yourself, just to tell yourself that, to say like, no, these are different skill sets. I by being really good at one, it doesn't automatically make me really good at the other, and that's okay as well. I think that one of the things that native speakers also face is that distance, that confidence in speech is its own like massive mountain to climb. That the top anxiety for high school students is public speaking in the United States. So when you came to the United States for college and you encountered for the first time these surprises, walk me through some of those.
Oh, there's so many. So one of my favorites though is silent letters, and how there's so many letters in English that you're just supposed to ignore. No one tells you that, and then you find out. So for example, one of my earliest memories at Yale, where I went to school for college, was when I was in this auditorium and I raised my hand to very confidently answer a question, and I said the Marine Corps instead of the Marine Corps, which is not quite what you want to say. And then that's when I realized that actually the P and the S from that word completely drop, and you're not supposed to say those. And then there's so many words like that, like the word debt being one of them. You're just not supposed to say the B in that word. And even in business school later on, I would have a lot of my international classmates say debt in class, which was always like, I was like, I used to also do that. So yeah, like silent letters. Are there any tips or tricks as an expert to help us avoid these types of missteps?
Unfortunately, the rules around silent letters come from a lot of different sources. So I wish there was a more straightforward way through, but it's often a consonant that's next to another consonant, and over time has become redundant, and so just drops. It's possible that at one time it was pronounced, but over however many speakings, it's just disappeared, like that B sound from the word debt. Sometimes it has to do with an English American pronunciation of a word from another language. And my advice is that if you come across a situation where you're not hearing a sound, you actually kind of find an example of it in something with a rhythm. So poetry or song lyrics, because if it's used in a song, it's going to be fit into sort of like a puzzle piece. It fits a rhythm, it fits a melody. It's a fast way to memorize. And I just go to lyrics.com and I type in whatever word I need to sort of like internalize. But silent letters are really tough because they're usually in words like academic words or words that are a little bit more impressive. So the fall is hard when you say it. You're like, oh, I'm being impressive. I feel that.
So I guess the takeaway is like anytime you spot like two consonants together where you've maybe never heard a native speaker say like a B and a T together that feels like a hard pronunciation, maybe double check and you might need to drop one of those.
Yeah. Be suspect.
That's my very simplified rule.
It's really correct.
Yeah.
Be suspect of too many consonants close to each other. Just start to, twirl your mustache around it, and see if one sort of naturally falls away. That's usually where those silent letters pop up.
Interesting. So speaking of things that we should be suspicious of, another thing that I'm very, like, anytime I see it, I'm like, wait, is the letter O in spelling and how it's supposed to sound. Because I think in most languages, if you see an O, it's said like an O, like an O sound. And in English, it's apparently never the case because the sound O by itself just doesn't exist, right?
That's right. In an American accent of English, this sort of lips rounded O sound doesn't exist on its own. So if you're coming from any of the Romance languages, but also, like you said, like most languages have some version, at least that use this alphabet, have some version of a sound that sort of looks like the letter. So the lip corners come forward and you make a sort of a O back vowel with a rounded lips. That doesn't exist. So my advice, and we've talked about this, is to make the wheel of O. So you know it's not O. But it could go in any number of directions. So around the wheel are a couple of sounds. Oo, like boot. Like good. Like none. O, like don't. And this is my favorite one because this one is like, what is that sound even? It's like an O, like don't. And then like lot. Oh my gosh, and there's more. There's ow.
So many options.
So many options. Yeah. So many options. So that's one of the reasons why Bold Voice is really useful, because we talk about sounds and you get more comfortable with the sounds and you practice those sounds. So they become something you're confident in. And then you're going to spin that wheel.
You spin the wheel. I think for me personally, the most surprising application of the O was in an ah sound. For me, like book or foot or words like that, where it's a double O. If anything, I would pronounce this as boot, like with more of the oo. So that's another issue. But the word, for example, hot instead of hot, or dog instead of dog. I still struggle with those to the day because it's just like so clearly a no, and you just kind of have to unlearn it. It's so interesting. Yeah,
it's so true. I think there's a lot in the American accent that even in other accents of English has a little bit of lip corners forward. So like if you go to the UK, you'll hear people say hot and dog. And American sounds, there's a lot of American sounds.
Flattened, like almost like flattened, right?
Yeah, there's lip corners come back, open it up.
Yeah.
When in doubt, try the lip corners back. Try it. Even because it won't be the intuitive choice, so it might be the right one.
Whenever you feel like it's not intuitive, it's the American way to do it.
Oh, yes. That's heartbreakingly true, I think.
Another topic that surprised me, or another speech pattern that I noticed when I first moved to the US, was word linking, and how there's this certain musicality to how Americans speak. And I noticed that part of that is because they don't pronounce each word individually and kind of chopped up. They link them, and there's certain patterns to that linking, and probably a lot of rules that I'm maybe to at this point to an extent subconsciously aware of, and some of the rules that I'm more consciously aware of. So one of the things that I've noticed is that if a word ends in the same sound that the next word starts with, then that sound kind of carries over from one word to the next. So like you don't say I feel lucky, you say I feel lucky, and that kind of makes the whole thing flow more nicely.
Absolutely.
What other rules are there? Like, how else should we think about linking?
So some other insights into linking is that linking, like you said, in English, there's a flow. There's a very specific way. Same sounds, for sure. sounds that get made in similar parts of the vocal tract, or like with similar parts of the body, like words that end in M and then words that begin in B. And this comes from economy. We want to do less when we can.
We're lazy.
We're lazy.
We want to be lazy. We want to do less.
We want to do less. We want to do as little as we can and still be understood. All accents, all languages have some version of this. And learning about linking is what's going to give you the flow of any accent. My advice for learning linking, and this is really hard, I have trouble taking my own advice, is to let go of the edges of words, because when you're learning a language, it's real, like part of what gives you confidence in the language is knowing like this is a complete word, and then this is the next word, and then this is the next word. It's how we build sentences, it's how we make sense of patterns. A plus B equals C. And so letting go of one part of that, especially the beginnings and endings, feels like a slippery slope of, oh, now I won't have the clear distinctions of the building blocks of this language. So the best thing to do is to slow yourself down, allow for the words to sort of join and the edges of them to overlap or layer or bleed into one another. And my trick for that is to speak in slow motion. I always end up sounding a little bit like a cartoon of a drunk person. Somebody who is, again, their edges are sort of like not clearly defined. And that helps. So I practice in that slow way with my edges are a little fuzzy. And then when I speed up, I just sound like somebody who has economically gotten rid of certain sounds or brought them together.
Yeah. And then I think there's also certain words, right, that you can kind of almost memorize up front that are typically bunched up together that are pretty common. So what'd you, like, where'd you, like, what'd you think, where'd you go, like there's this did you, do you kind of linking. So that's almost a cheat code for like sounding a little bit more fluent and more just like doing some of that linking. Just memorize some of those common. Are there any other examples that you can think of that are pretty common?
So anytime you're coming up to like a duh sound or a tuh sound and moving directly into a ya sound, would you or can't you? It's I have to make sense of it in a certain way. Those are very specific sounds, and in between them I allow a sort of a friction sound. So would you becomes would you.
Interesting, yeah.
Can't you becomes can't you. So oftentimes linking is about allowing a little bit of glue between the two. Yeah, something that comes in there.
Yeah, like so fuzziness, glue, something happens there, some
happens.
alchemy, we'll figure it out.
Alchemy.
Another part of, and this is probably like the last in the list for me, although again, we could go forever, but intonation is also a huge part of the American accent, and something that was, I don't know if this applies to other people or was just something esoteric about my own speech, but when it came to questions, I always had a hard time with them because I would try to ask a question, and instead of making it sound like a question at the very end, I felt like I was just making it sound like a question from the very beginning, and then I just didn't have a natural place to stop asking the question. So I'd almost never stop the question because I was like, what do I do with my voice so they know that I didn't just make a statement but I'm asking them a question? So I would just go with like, or is it this? Like add another point to make it specific based on the content that it's a question. And I've learned actually from you that that's not the right way to do it, or rather that there's an easier way to do it with intonation and using our voice to make it clear when we're asking a question in a more economical way. So do you want to share with everyone how that works?
So I think that's a very common phenomenon of, oh, I should add more so that the context is understood. But that's just so you were experiencing a case of your ear was correct. Your ear told you, I need something at the end. And an upward, a very small, it can be small, it can be big, but an upward inflection towards the end of a yes or no question. Like, put it on the last noun or verb or adjective, put it at the end, far to the end as you can. Signals to someone that you want a response, right?
I see what you did there.
Wow. So you can, if you implement that, make shorter questions. But I mean, there's a lot of ways to do it. I think a lot of people also resort to small additions like the word right or no or huh. But they're just taking advantage of that little thoughts.
That's my favorite.
Responses. But that is everybody is looking for that. The audible equivalent of a written question mark.
Okay. So save it for the last one. Not, do you want to go to the theater, but do you want to go to the theater?
And that little upward inflection right at the end is very satisfying and prompts your listener. They go, oh.
Yeah. I'm being asked something. Yeah. Awesome. So to sum it up, should we share some more generalizable tips and tricks for how to get to these kind of conclusions on your own faster, so that you don't have to like go through as much trial and error as I personally did?
I think yes, we should. Let's each share.
Yeah.
If I had one piece of advice to speed up this process, it would be to try to get to the heart of the why, right? Of course, you want to observe the speakers around you, but can you maybe tie what they're doing to a why? I observe that the speaker uses a little upward inflection at the end of that sentence. Why? They're prompting or they're wanting something. And then you can apply it much more quickly to your life, because you won't be copying someone, rather you'll be using their tool. So instead of kind of replicating their behavior, you're just basically like borrowing their tool. And
when it makes sense, you also are more likely to be able to apply it, rather than when you're like, I don't know why this is happening, but let me just try to replicate it.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah,
exactly.
Makes sense. We already talked a lot about this, but I think my biggest takeaway from all of this is that don't trust spelling. And it's really like scary to divorce yourself from spelling, because you're like, any sound could be almost anything, but that's not the case. Most sounds, especially consonants, I think can be more trustworthy, but when it comes to vowels, mistrust vowels.
Vowels mistrust are suspicious.
But no, especially vowels like the vowel O, well, not the vowel O, the letter O, and some others. So try to unlearn those things that you think you know, and those pronunciations you think you know, and then open up your ears a little bit more to people around you, native speakers. If you don't have native speakers around you, then movies that you watch, music that you listen to, and try to, with a focus on vowels, which I think are the biggest bang for your buck, figure out how they might be different in pronunciation, and then try to apply that new word, not new in terms of the vocabulary, but new in terms of the pronunciation, as many times as possible right after you learn it, so it sticks.
That's it, yeah. Immediate use and multiple. So you'll retain more with small amounts of practice frequently than big chunks of practice every once in a blue moon.
Very good idiom. Awesome. Any other tips on your side?
Oh, I think be patient with yourself, but I think we gave them some.
And then of course our biggest tip and our tool for you is BoldVoice. We have Eliza and some other amazing coaches on there. They can help you work through all of these sounds, understand all of these various patterns of American English. And then obviously you can also practice and get specific feedback from our speech AI. So it's almost as good as having Eliza in your pocket fixing your pronunciation, but it's more convenient. Let's just say that.
Yes. And
Slightly.
Convenience is going to be the difference between progress and just like desire to get better. Remember that everybody has the same equipment. So native speakers, they've got exactly what you have. The only difference is that they've had more time. So give yourself a really convenient way to catch up. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for joining us. And yeah, we'll leave links for BoldVoice to download it with a week free if you'd like to try it out. And see you in the next video. Bye.
Hey.